The conflict between the Comanches and Apaches traces back to the early 18th century, persisting for almost a century. The Comanches, deeply involved in warfare during this period, successfully displaced the Lipan and Mescalero Apaches from the plains. The enduring animosity between these groups is reflected in the derogatory names they use for each other. The Comanches referred to the Mescalero and Lipan Apaches as esikwita, meaning grey excrement. Conversely, the Apaches labeled the Comanches as Indassene, derived from indas, signifying enemy. This historical context underscores the deep-seated and long-standing nature of their conflicts, marked by territorial disputes and cultural differences. Here on Native Journals, we will closely examine the course of this conflict in this video. Kindly hit the like and subscribe button to show us your unwavering support. As the sun rises, two young Apache hunters quietly ride their horses up a hill, careful not to scare away any animals. One of them is Bobo, riding his father's horse, and the other is Herman Lehman, who used to live on a German-speaking farm in Texas but now belongs to the Apache tribe, with only vague memories of his old life. On May 16, 1870, Herman and his younger siblings were attempting to shoo away birds in the wheat fields. Unexpectedly, they became the targets of an Apache raiding party. Herman and his 8-year-old brother Willie were seized during the attack. While Willie managed to escape after a few days, Herman remained captive, unable to break free from his assailants. Living among the Apache people was challenging even after joining a family. The harsh conditions in West Texas, with its dry land and ongoing conflicts with Americans, Mexicans, and other tribes, made life challenging and sometimes violent for everyone. Despite this, for now, Herman felt like he belonged to the Apache tribe. Still, he didn't fully become Apache, a fact emphasized every time he heard his new name, Inda, a constant reminder of his outsider status, translating to white boy. Regardless of being called Herman or Inda, he enthusiastically embraced the role of a young warrior in training. His mentor, Chief Carnovist, his adopted father and the group leader initially taking him and his brother, introduced him to the harsh realities of Apache life even before returning to their village. On the trail, food was scarce, and cooking while potentially being pursued was too risky. In one memorable incident, Herman was compelled to eat the raw liver of a calf they had slaughtered. Despite his initial struggles a few days later, his Texan palate became less discerning when they found abandoned baby antelope. Swiftly captured and put in a leather sack, these young antelope became a meal for the Apache after a campfire halt. Such experiences, including those recounted in Herman's memoir, 9 Years Among the Indians, marked his unconventional journey into Apache life. Herman recalls feeling a mix of amazement and fear when the antelope parents, known for keeping a close eye on their young, showed up near the camp to save their endangered babies. The Apache quickly captured both antelopes, turning it into a big feast. It was the first proper meal they had enjoyed in a while, and everyone was grateful for the occasion. Herman's life took a big turn when he went from being a young German farmer in Texas to becoming an Apache warrior. In this harsh land that didn't give much but asked for a lot, he learned essential skills like riding, tracking, hunting, and fighting to care for himself and his new family. The Apache were clever at finding water in dry places and were known for their skills in tracking animals and people across rocky areas. They were respected as skilled warriors and feared as raiders from Utah to Mexico. The Apache used to live in the fertile parts of Texas and the southern plains, hunting buffalo and gathering from pecan trees. But everything changed when the Comanche arrived from the north. They quickly learned to use horses, becoming influential in the southern plains. They planned to push the Apache out of central and southern Texas. The Comanche raids were solid and widespread, affecting many tribes like the Tonkawa, Karankawa, Caddo, Waco, Cheyenne, and also the Spanish Mexicans and Texans. The Comanche's power shook things up, leaving a lasting impact on the region's history. The stories told a grim tale with a haunting resemblance. Young men ready for battle faced either death defending their families, or if spared, brutal execution through torturous methods by the Comanche. Women endured sexual assault, and infants were often killed during the raiders' retreat. Children and teens underwent harsh initiation processes before joining the tribe, echoing Herman's experiences with the Apache. Interestingly, the Comanche had remarkably diverse bloodlines. High male mortality rates, a result of frequent combat, contrasted with relatively low birth rates, and miscarriages were common among these constantly horsebound people. Raids typically ended with the plundering of horses and goods, along with the destruction of homes and crops. The Apache, facing one of the most severe onslaughts from the Comanche, lost many stories to history. Their swift retreat from Texas reflected the ferocity of the attacks. Despite challenges, the Apache adapted, surviving in new lands with less abundant game. Herman and Bobo ventured from camp one morning, feeling relatively safe from Comanche attacks. Confident they were far west of Comanche territory, their main concern was not disturbing the game and finding their way back. Suddenly, the boys heard approaching hoofbeats, realizing they were not from their village. Before they could discuss the source, a band of Comanche warriors appeared. At the ridge's bottom, the young Apache boys had one option: swiftly flee back to their village, aiming to alert tribe members for a defense. Bobo's swift and well-trained horse darted back towards the village at speed. In stark contrast, Herman's mule proved less cooperative. Despite enduring prolonged beatings, the skittish and obstinate mule exhibited peculiar behavior in this critical moment. As Herman urged it toward the Apache village, the mule spun in tight circles, showing no clear direction. Desperate, Herman called out to Bobo for help, but the panicked rider, atop his agile mount, raced back to the Apache village without looking back. After several spins, a Comanche arrow struck the mule in the hip, breaking it from its panicked spin. It galloped toward the Apache village with Herman desperately clinging on. Surging past Bobo, the mule, fueled by fear, outpaced the young man who cried out not to be abandoned. However, as Herman vividly recalls, once that mule was in motion, its determined course was not stopping, leaving Bobo to face a tiring horse and approaching Comanches. Herman's mule dashes wildly through the Apache camp, knocking over people as it rushes back to the village's horse herd. The peaceful camp turns chaotic. At the horse herd, the mule tries to shake off Herman. He gets off, jumps onto another horse, and quickly returns to the village. When Herman returns, a fight against about 40 approaching Comanche warriors is getting more intense. Apache warriors are pushing them back. In the chaos, Herman looks for his friend Bobo but can't find him. Arrows fly as Herman sees a group of warriors moving toward an area outside the village. There, he sees his friend's lifeless body on the ground, pierced by Comanche arrows and his scalp taken. The young hunter who went into the wilderness with Herman that morning is gone. Overwhelmed by the situation, Herman, filled with rage, joins a group of Apache warriors determined to move forward and recapture the fallen warrior's body. Herman shared in his stories about a tough battle where the Apache fought hard against the Comanche. Even though the Comanche were skilled fighters, the Apache had more warriors. The battle started around 10 in the morning and went on all day. As the sun set, the Comanches left, leaving many of their comrades on the battlefield. The Apache decided not to chase them, but the cost was high. 20 Apache warriors went to the happy hunting ground and 8 more were in pain. Sadly, 4 of them died that night and 1 more warrior passed away the next day. The Apache gave a respectful burial to those who didn't make it. After the battle, Herman and his friends went back to the battlefield. They gathered usable weapons like guns, bows, arrows, and shields from the Comanche. They also took any horses left behind, unlike the Apache practice of giving fallen warriors a proper burial. The Comanche were not treated with respect. Their bodies were gathered and left for scavengers like wolves and vultures. To avoid more encounters with the Comanche, the Apache quickly packed and left, heading north. Scouts were sent out to search for hidden Comanche and found 2 spies. One was shot and killed, and the other was captured. The captive spy faced harsh treatment by Conversely, Herman's adoptive father and the village chief. The Comanche warrior had holes cut into his arms, a cord was strung through them, and he was hung from a tree. Herman later shared a surprising story where an old Apache, who had his nose cut off before, felt sorry for the captured Comanche. Against the usual way of thinking, this old Apache secretly cut the Comanche down, showing a different side. The Apache group reached a spring about 60 miles from their camp, taking a few days to deal with feelings of grief and anger. One morning, an older Apache had a scary dream about a massive group of Comanches chasing them. He told Conversely about the dream, and the village elders had a long meeting without eating or drinking to decide what to do next. They knew the threat from the Comanche was still there. Most of the Apache decided it was best to retreat strategically, leaving the area to avoid more losses from the persistent Comanche threat. In agreement, Conversely and the village elders quickly moved the village again, departing a top priority. Once more, horses and mules were swiftly loaded as the Apache moved westward, navigating quietly through a landscape with little tactical cover. After covering 20 miles, doubts emerged. Maybe all this preparation was an overreaction to the ramblings of a sleep-deprived older man. Suddenly, the landscape transformed as dozens of Comanche warriors seemed to appear from nowhere, overwhelming the once empty horizon. The Apache fought back fiercely, arrows flying, but in minutes, the small Apache band faced devastating losses. 40 warriors were lost, and most women and children were captured by the Comanche, who also seized all their horses, food, and equipment. Despite significant losses on both sides, approximately 100 Apache warriors, along with 6 women, managed to escape on foot. They wandered the desolate landscape for a month, barely surviving with limited food and water. Eventually, Herman and the remaining survivors encountered another formidable group of Comanche, 150 warriors strong and well-armed. Sharing their harrowing tales, a call echoed across Apache territory for bands to convene at a well-known location, Apache Scouts, a dry lake bed universally recognized. Warriors arrived from as far as Utah, Arizona, and Mexico. The camp buzzed with activity as warriors crafted arrows, hardened spear points, cleaned rifles, and reinforced shields. The Apache collectively decided they could no longer endure the relentless Comanche aggression. It was time for their people to unite, seeking revenge on the Comanche who had long mistreated them. Many felt they had reached a point of no return, a time when coexistence was no longer possible, and the Apache were determined to eradicate the Comanche and reclaim their homeland. Hatred for the Comanche ran so deep that even women and children underwent repetitive drills in weapon handling and escape routes, preparing for an imminent great battle. At a time of reckoning, he was approached by the Apache and Comanche, with legendary Chief Victorio and military leader and medicine man Geronimo joining the camp, ready for war. Embodying his legendary status, Victorio volunteered to lead a band of trusted scouts westward in a preliminary search for any Comanche in the territory. As more days passed and more Apache arrived at the camp, preparing for potential conflict, there was still no sign of Victorio's scouting party. Finally, Victorio returned to the camp, barely holding onto his mount. Sadly, he shared the news that all his companions had been killed, and the Comanche now knew the Apache were in their territory. In another meeting, Victorio, Geronimo, Conversely, and other leaders discussed what to do next. Victorio suggested making peace with the Comanche, emphasizing the need for tribes to unite against their common enemy, the whites. He warned against internal conflicts and highlighted the support the whites provided to the Comanche with guns and ammunition. Red Wasp, another chief, disagreed, saying they shouldn't fear the pale faces. He listed the injustices caused by the whites, from taking their hunting grounds to spreading disease, and called for resistance, ready to fight the Comanche to the end. After much discussion, they decided to try for a truce with the Comanche. They hoped that achieving peace between the two tribes could unite them against the ongoing invasions by the whites, whether they were Texans, Americans, Mexicans, or Spanish. The next day, the Apache, carrying a white flag of truce, approached within 3 miles of the Comanche camp. A Comanche warrior rode towards them, circling them from a safe distance, taunting and waving a black shield, an unmistakable challenge for a deadly battle. In a crucial moment, the Apaches could have responded with a red shield, accepted the challenge, and started the battle. Surprisingly, the Apache rider approached unarmed, still carrying the white flag of truce. The astonished Comanche signaled for 6 of their men to meet 6 Apache representatives halfway between the two parties. 6 Apache men were chosen for this diplomatic mission and rode out to meet the Comanche. Surprisingly, the Comanche expressed a willingness to make peace under the condition that the Apache responsible for mistreating their tribesmen be handed over for justice. The Apache emissaries, knowing the Comanche, referred to Chief Conversely, who was alive and well, and informed them that the responsible Apache had unfortunately been killed in the earlier battle. Though disheartened, the Comanche agreed to let go of the issue, choosing a unified and mutually beneficial peace. On this shaky foundation of misinformation, the truce was formalized. The women and children taken captive earlier were happily reunited with their Apache families, and tears of celebration flowed. Some Apache women, willingly or not, chose to stay with the Comanche, forming marital bonds to strengthen relations between the two tribes. Even the older woman with no nose, who had cut down the Comanche, left, and Herman didn't feel sad about her departure. In the end, Herman credited Victorio for leading the way to peace between the two tribes. However, their plans for unity and retaliation have yet to happen. Victorio's diplomatic skill in this situation showed exceptional leadership. While this story ended well, there were still many instances where conflicts like these caused much bloodshed and suffering, both before and after. Herman stayed with his tribe for 6 years, but he had to leave after avenging Carnovisti's death by killing a medicine man, leading to his exile. He spent a year hiding, surviving the tricky area between the Pecos and Rio Grande rivers. Eventually, loneliness and necessity compelled him to seek out a Comanche tribe. When Herman shared his story with them, they welcomed him and named him Monteshena. Well, we'll explore the rest of this story in another video. Do well, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel to enjoy more Native American history. Till next time, thank you.